I finally get to sit down with the illustrious Heidi Browning, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at the NHL. I want to give Heidi a chance to share a presentation. So Heidi, please take it away.
Great. And thank you so much for having me, Jay. You and I have been talking about this for such a long time. And every date that we had was either, the start of the season or Stanley Cup playoffs. And so it took a pandemic to get us together, but I'm really, really happy about it. The presentation I have for you today is really to showcase some of the content that we've been creating during the season pause. And I'd love it to be a dialogue. So as we go through this, if you have questions, feel free to ask them through the chat box, and Jay will help facilitate, and then we'll have plenty of time afterwards to have an even deeper conversation. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and get cooking here. So, okay, can you all see the screen? Nod yes? Okay, great. This was the day that everything changed in our world. For the first time ever in the history of sport, all the sports leagues around the world paused. This was on March 12th this year, and from that point forward, everything really changed for us. And when we look at all the consumer sentiment that's out there, there are numbers of companies out there doing research and pulses on fans from week to week, from the beginning of this pandemic to today. There are certain themes that hold true for that, and brands play a huge role in it. So whether you're an entertainment brand or a lifestyle brand or a pragmatic service that you need, how we show up as leaders really matter to our consumers and to our fans. And it's especially true with sports fans. Looking at loyalty to brands, how we have established ourselves as leaders in the space, how we're helping our communities really matters and has a lasting impression on our fans. It also has an opportunity for us to open the minds of new fans. There are 70% of sports fans who say that they would support people based on how they're conducting themselves through the pandemic, and how 57% would even explore new sports based on their leadership and how they've conducted themselves through the pandemic. So as a sport who's trying to continually reach new audiences and grow, we want to make sure that we are doing the right things and participating in the right way in our community and for our fans. And so with that, I want to share with you some of the strategies that we put in place to do this. When this pause first went into place, we basically ceased all of our social media content. We have a very robust content schedule that we produce both day and night, both in-game and outside of the game window. And we thought, as the whole globe paused to understand what this was all about, we needed to stop all other communication and only focus on the news and the information that was most important. So we put only league announcements out on our social media feeds. We started to put club announcements out there too, and then put safety, best practices, health, hygiene, messagings of support really early on. It still remains a critical part of our strategy, but for that first week or two, that was all that we talked about. The second piece of this is community. The second pillar is really important too. As sports teams and leagues, we're so dependent on and inspiring to the communities that support us from both the fan base as well as economically. We're all part of a whole, and the ability for us to leverage our platform to show how we're making a difference in people's lives, rallying fans and giving back and giving comfort is an important role we play in sports. So that's a big part of our communication strategy as well. And then the last part is really that idea of connection. And now more than ever, our fans need and want to have that connection with not only the teams, but the players themselves. Our players are not as involved in social media as maybe some other leagues are. And this is a real opportunity for us to peel off the visors and really showcase the personality personalities of our players. They're just like us. They're sheltering in place at home too. They're going through some of the same challenges that we are, as having to share space with people and family members, having to teach kids their homework, and balancing and juggling all the things that we are as well. So being able to give our fans a snapshot into their lives, both through original content as well as direct interviews with them, has been a really critical and important part of our strategy. So as we look at communication, again, this is, it seems like it was a lifetime ago. It was just 2 months ago that this all began. But really, the importance of athletes as being heroes to their fans, especially young fans. People look to athletes to take cues on everything in culture and life. So it was especially important that we got our athletes out there to be communicating messages of safety and hygiene. And when the league first took a pause, Nick Foligno was one of the first players to really stand up and make a statement out to the fan base to say this was the right decision and we all have to do our part. And with that, all the players also joined into the conversation, also sharing their messages of support for this decision, but also that they're practicing what we're preaching, they're doing their part, and asking everyone out there to do their part. And we've done a number of Q&As and videos that really share and showcase how each and every player is telling their story and their version of it. And what was really neat is a lot of the players, were doing it with their kids and with their dogs and with their families. And so it really was a wonderful way to get to know them personally. From a safety and leadership standpoint, I have to just say, because we're hockey, Canada really outdid themselves in using hockey as a metaphor for education and teaching people what is 6 feet apart, how to stay 6 feet apart. And it's the safe physical distance is actually a hockey stick apart from each other. And so all the community signs for their recreation areas were closed and had this hockey stick reference in them. And then we also had, some of our play-by-play announcers had a lot of fun with this, if you can have fun with hygiene. And Ken Cal in Detroit did a play-by-play of how to wash your hands properly, which was quite a hit and quite amusing if you get a chance to take a look at that. From a community standpoint, this again is where our heartbeat is. We are so deeply connected and indebted to our communities and our fan base. We want to make sure that they know that we're contributing in a myriad of ways, whether it's, supporting our frontline and essential workers, or whether it's, delivering food to kids who quite often the only meal that they get is the meal that they have in school, and with schools out. We've rallied around a number of different causes to make sure that we're doing our part. You can see here that the different teams have taken different approaches, whether it's buying food for the COVID relief workers at a medical center, or delivering. A lot of our players have moms and sisters and family members who are frontline workers, so they've been particularly involved in delivering protective equipment to those hospitals and charities. And then one area that we're really proud of is our partnership with EverFi. We have a curriculum that's focused on STEM, and it's taught through the principles of hockey. And so it's called Future Goals. And we made this free to anyone and everyone who found themselves suddenly being teachers at home with their kids. And it's a fun way to learn math and science and engineering. From a partnership standpoint, all of our partners have rallied. Again, this is part of brand leadership in a time of crisis, and we were so pleased to see all of our partners join and do their part, and the charities that were really important to them and their businesses. Bauer Hockey was amazing. They stepped up, and the very same face shields, visors that they wear, particularly in women's hockey, are the ones that you see these medical medical workers wearing here today. And so that was an incredible, incredible development in helping the protective equipment. We were at at that point in time constrained in supply of protective equipment. And so this was a real great help for our medical workers. And then the other post here is from Haley Wickenheiser, who is a multi gold Olympian hockey player. She's one of the best. She works for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and she is also in her final year of med school and a frontline worker, and has been working with her crew throughout this entire pandemic. And so she was thanking Canadian Tire for their support for her crew that's been on the front line working day and night to help patients through the COVID crisis. So by the numbers, we've had incredible, and these numbers I have to say are already old. This is 2 weeks old, but we generated $10 million in contributions in money from players, from owners, from our club foundations, again, really trying to contribute to the overall success of our communities and our societies. We've had 450,000 personal protective equipment donations, and then 650,000 meal and food donations. Okay, moving on to connection. This is the part where if there were a silver lining to this, this is the silver lining for us. Hockey players, as you know, are very humble and they're very quiet, and they are all about playing for the name on the front of the jersey, not the name on the back. And with that, it's been, a challenge, quite frankly, in hockey culture to get more and more players adopting social media. Because hockey is such a team sport, sometimes social media is viewed as, having an individual stand out. We all know that there are ways to use social media that is really about giving back to your team, giving back to community, and celebrating what's great about everyone. And this has been a real opportunity for our players to participate in social media, not only to talk about what they're doing in the community and give fans messages of safety and health and hygiene, but also to share a little bit about their lives and what it's like, in their lives. And so this opened up a whole host of content that we haven't seen to date in terms of both the variety and the volume and the number of players participating. So this has been really exciting for us. We had an overarching architecture of hockey at home. That's our theme for this entire pause that we're undergoing right now. And you can see the players participated in lots of different ways. Some are showing their skills and how they're staying sharp. None of our players have been on ice, so all the workouts and the training that they've done, they've had to do just like us in our homes and our yards. So it's fun to see, how they've taken, unusual, everyday common household items to help enhance their workouts or use their dogs and kids to help out. We've had fun with the family. That second post there is Patrick Marleau skating through his house with his kid chasing him, saying, "But Dad, you're not allowed to skate in the house," which was kind of funny. We've got home workouts. A number of players are posting their workouts and challenging their fans to do it with them. Self-expression. Everybody wants to know what you're binging, what you're reading, what you're cooking. This has been a really bright spot in terms of showcasing and getting to know our players on a personal level. And then, just like us, they're, participating in social media in new ways, going live. The example here is showing Austin Matthews and Justin Bieber and their friends. They've been going live together on Instagram, and it's just kind of fun to see their friendship. They're two famous people, but they're regular guys, especially when they talk about hockey. Hockey at home is not limited just to what we're doing at the league and what the players are doing, but this is a huge user-generated content program and opportunity for us too. Every day we've got a team of people scouring Instagram and Twitter and TikTok and Facebook to find the best hockey at home content, and fans are seeing that and hashtagging it, so it's making it a lot easier for us to find. And we're republishing it with their permission and incorporating it into our feeds because it's incredible what some of these fans have. You can see how they're, decking out their homes with their, their hockey at home experiences, how they're missing us, wearing pads, practicing at home. And this fun video on the far right of the screen is a fan in Europe who's chopping onions with his skate blade. Who knew that they doubled as knives in the kitchen? One of the areas that we're really proud about and it was completely experimental. It started out as a Zoom press conference, and it was like the week after we had went on our pause. We felt like we wanted to make the players available to the media. Well, it turned into conversations about what they're doing, what they're reading, what they're binging, what it's like, cameos from their family and their dogs. And so this became a thing. And so the first week we did it every day. Then we've continued doing it with different themes on Mondays and Fridays. We've even extended these Zoom conversations internationally. So we've had a Russian Zoom, a Swiss, a French, and Swedish with our players who are at home sheltering in place with their families around the world. So we take this content, we air it in its entirety, but when we also chop it up into little snackable bits and pieces and distribute around, and it's just been so refreshing and fun, again, to see the guys, having fun with each other. We started out with divisional press conferences. These are highly competitive guys in their league, but just having fun with each other and continuing to do more of this. We feel proud of this because we were doing these Zoom conferences really before even the late night shows and some of these other groups were doing it. So we had a lot of lessons learned in this and are continuing to proceed with it. We took the theme of this Zoom and brought it from a digital space into linear. So our broadcast partners, have been doing a terrific job of surfacing some of the greatest, classic games and themes around those classic games and Stanley Cups and greatest moments. But we wanted to pepper in a little bit of additional content that we're capturing because this is all new and fresh content for our fans. So taking our digital and broadcasting it through linear was a really great boost for us to reach audiences. So we did the Hockey at Home show. We had themes like the Great One-on-One with the Great Eight, where we had Wayne Gretzky and Alex Ovechkin had actually faced off in an eSport tournament. And so we brought in features from that, as well as conversations about what it was like to play each other and their mutual respect for each other as hockey players. We did a brothers, we've done mothers, we've done all different themes and variations, and continue to do this, which again has been a really bright spot for us because it is really showing the personal side of our athletes. We gathered a couple of reunion shows where we actually got the entire team of the St. Louis Blues together. And we did this on what would have been the first day of the Stanley Cup playoffs. These are the defending champions. And we wanted to, get a conversation going about what it was like, thinking back to, winning the cup and what it would, would be like to start the season and kind of how they were feeling now. We also did a reunion with the Boston Bruins. And many other of our teams have continued to do this. It's just really fun to see these guys getting back together. They're not getting together in real life either, obviously. So it's great for everyone to have that dynamic of groups through Zoom. A new show that we created was called Hat Trick Trivia, and this is kind of themed off that old idea of beer money. So you answer one question, if you get it right, you can trade it in for a better gift, and then if you get that right, then you get traded in for an even better prize. And so we asked PK Subban to host this. He's one of our players. He's the New Jersey Devils. I saw a Devils fan there. He's got an incredible personality, and certainly has a career ahead of him post NHL as being a host. And he's been engaging fans in these trivia, this hat trick trivia show. We also bring in players. We brought in Gary Bettman, our commissioner. We brought in Wes McCauley, who's one of our more famous officials, to help give clues to fans if they were struggling to get the right answers. So that's been incredibly fun. And we simulcast that on all of our social and digital channels, just like all the other content that we've talked about, as well as on our linear channels. We've been doing player Q&As, which are different, right? These are going through Twitter and through Instagram and crowdsourcing fans to ask our players questions and having them respond, both answering through video, through images, etc. We've been trying to do a player a day ever since the pause was put into place, and we've come pretty close. We take the break on the weekends, but we then recap all the Q&As on Mondays on our Instagram channels. So this has been a really fun way for fans to get their, crazy questions answered. And a lot of them are related to, again, how they're keeping busy during the pause. What are they watching? What's, pop culture references? What are their hidden talents? There was the whole meme going around about, how do you eat cereal? Do you do milk first or cereal? All of those things have surfaced throughout these Q&As. And again, really nice snapshots. We've taken this to our international channels as well, in Germany and Sweden, to make sure that our players who are, sheltering in place at home also have an outlet with their fans in language. The greatest moments of the season, we kicked this off. This is like a bracket where we pair up the greatest moments. Many of them are on ice, but we're also doing sort of fan moments and pairing them up against each other. Fans go and vote every day, and then that moment moves forward and gets paired up with a new moment. This is, one of our opportunities to engage fans in conversation around these moments that really mattered to everyone, whether they're human or whether they're, highlights from games. It's been a great conversation driver and driving millions and millions of votes and engagement with us. We decided to take it one step further as we've been building out our TikTok presence and recognizing the whole challenge culture that's out there. So we've challenged our TikTok followers to recreate some of these moments. We picked about 10 of the moments and have fans recreating those. So we haven't had one that's gone super viral yet, but we've had really great engagement. So that's been a fun way to take it to a new level and on different platforms. eSports has been filling the void. We, like many other major leagues, have been leaning in on this. And boy, we've done so many different experimentations with eSports during this pause. So we paused just short of our regular season ending. So what we did is we ran simulated game, CPU versus CPU with EA, and ran some of that. Some of our teams broadcast that through their RSNs and or on Twitter or Twitch. And so that was a way to kind of play out the season through virtual esports. But we've also been creating tournaments, and some of our teams are doing it on their own in their own markets. We've got a player challenge across all 31 teams that's happening right now and airing on Twitch as well as on NBC and Sportsnet. One of the great ones that happened was that a team took on was Monumental Sports through the Washington Capitals. They paired Alex Ovechkin, the great 8, with Wayne Gretzky, the great 1. And these two, it was hilarious to watch them play each other in the sport. It was as if they were on the ice together. And, they were both like having fun and sweating and stressed and like, chirping at each other. It was such a fun engagement and really great to see them having fun at home with the game as well. So these results, again, are a couple weeks old, but, we were really proud to see them. We've had over 203 million video views on our channels, 40,000. This has doubled since then, I can tell you right now. 40,000 mentions of hockey at home on social, 24 million engagements. We've had, here, 573 players posting. Those are individual players posting. We now have well over 600 that have posted, which again is such an important metric for us because our players have been very quiet and reluctant to participate in social media. So it's great to see so many out there. Just the player posts alone, we've had almost 10 million engagements, and the engagement rate is high. It's 4 to 5x that of other leagues. And I think that is a testament to the fact that our players have been so quiet and our fans are so hungry to hear from them that we're seeing such high engagement rates on their player posted content. And so with that, I'm going to end the conversation and open it up for questions, but I do want to play for you our video that we made for what would have been the first day of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So let's play the video now. Hopefully it'll come through for you.
The fans, I miss the game, I miss them playing in front of you guys. You guys have always been tremendous to us.
There's nothing more that we'd love than to be on the ice in front of you. I hope to see all of you back out there.
Looking forward to see you guys at the stands again.
I know that there'll be better days, better days.
We love our fans. We miss them. We miss playing in front of you guys.
Being with the fans, get the goosebumps when you step on the ice.
Miss playing in front of you, great fans.
We miss you guys.
Shed another tear for today. Oh, I know that there'll be better days.
All right. And with that, I'm back.
Right. Heidi, thank you for that. That was awesome. Answered a lot of the questions that I was going to ask you. I do want to start with one piece, though. You've had quite a bit of experience in digital and social and thinking about how to engage fans. And obviously, NHL fans are unique in terms of their love for the sport, their passion, how they feel about the athletes themselves and how they feel about the franchises. You laid out at the beginning some values that you wanted to attend to with respect to how you guys were going to communicate with fans. Did you have kind of an underlying strategy or complementary strategy that went with that? Were you thinking about how are we going to engage this particular group? Were there things that you knew about your fans that motivated you to engage with them in all the ways you presented?
Yeah, I mean, one of the principles that we embrace is listening to our fans. We do a lot of focus groups, research. I've got a young youth advisory board. We're always listening to understand not only what our avid fans want, but what about casual fans? What are the perceptions and barriers, and how can we make them feel welcome into the hockey family and want to watch more hockey? So throughout all of these conversations, there's one theme that emerges consistently, which is, they love that the avid fans are the most passionate in all of sports, and people admire that in them. But they're also kind of intimidated a little bit because there's so much knowledge around the history and the traditions and the rules and all that kind of stuff. So really, how do we open up and kind of share more information around that? But they also noted that our players are the quiet. They're like the best athletes on ice. Not only are they incredible athletes, but they're on like micro blades on ice, but they don't know them at all off ice. And, there's been an evolution in all of sports where it used to all be about the team, right? And now with social media creating these bonds and connections and accessibility to everyone, whether you're, a musician, an artist, an athlete, a politician, your friends, a stranger who has a common interest, that expectation of connectivity is there. And so fans are following athletes first now, then teams, and then leagues. And this has been a big mission of ours at the league, is how do we unlock that? How do we kind of start to shift hockey culture to make social media participation, accepted in the locker room, because it is so important for our fans to have that connection.
Well, it's crazy. For me, I'm looking at what's happening across media, entertainment, and sports as a result of the stay-at-home, safer-at-home initiatives everywhere. And what you see is that in some cases, it's accelerating trends that were already underway. You talk about the role that individual athletes have in promoting the sport, and obviously that's not something that's always been endemic to NHL culture. So could you talk a little bit about how you motivated players to do something which I don't think any of them really expected they would be doing? Like most young people who aspire to be on NHL teams weren't doing it so they could be on Twitter. So how did you do that? And how do you, how do you measure what's successful in terms of the impact of those initiatives? When players get engaged on social media, what really makes you happy about where the league is headed?
So there are a lot of questions in there. So if I forget one of them in my response, please bring it up again. But it's a journey, if I could just say that. Like we've started working with every layer of the hockey ecosystem to educate on the power and the value of social media, on the ability and to connect with fans, on the ability as an athlete to build your brand, and the fact that your social media following and engagement is your currency, your de facto currency. And when you look at things like ESPN does the top most popular athletes in the world, it's no longer an editorial list. It's a list that's fueled by data, and that data is your social media following, the Google searches, is all these important aspects from a digital standpoint that create your whole brand out there. So we're trying to educate the players on that. We're working arm in arm with our NHLPA. They're fantastic partners in this. We're working with our agents. We're working with the whole ownership, presidents, GMs, coaches association, obviously the social media and marketing and content teams at the clubs, every layer of the organization, to explain why it's important and showcase results of what happens when you participate. And so we've had more. I think that this is a result of not just the season being on pause and people having nothing to do. I think it was an opportunity to think through all the things that we've been educating on all this time, and then taking a moment and take a stand. And I think it was easy for our players to step forward and do the right thing around community and health and hygiene and that kind of communication. That's the easy step. You don't have to think about what you're going to say and worry about what people are going to say back and chirp you. I mean, I think every athlete goes through sort of the fan engagement concerns, because you always have trolls out there. This is sort of an easy way in, and we hope that they'll find it rewarding, and so rewarding that they'll continue when the season comes back to life again.
Seems like they really ran with it too, talking about people ice skating in the house and all this other stuff. Is there something that stands out for you so far in terms of engagement that you thought was really meaningful, impactful, something that really made you happy and optimistic about what's going to happen with fan engagement going forward?
Well, there's one project. I mean, in addition to just all of the engagement that we've seen with these players and some of the breakout moments that they've had. We've had players that we had no idea were as silly and funny as they are when they're like, unleashed and coming
Right.
out. Having fun on social media. So we've got a few surprises there, which is really fun. We've also seen a lot of our players' wives on TikTok or their kids on TikTok and them participating. So while they may not have TikTok accounts, they're getting into it and then posting on their, Insta and Twitter. So that's been really fun to kind of see that cross-pollination and connection there. And I think that's a really important thing. But one of the other areas that I'm just proud of us as a sports community coming together is, when this whole pause happened, 14 of us got together, 14 major sports leagues got together, and with our friends from Ad Week and Brand Week, many of us are on advisory boards with Brand Week. We're on diversity and inclusion committees, or we participate in some of their events and industry conferences. We're mentors to a lot of young people, and so we got together, just the CMOs from these 14 major sports leagues. It was kind of like a therapy session in the beginning, because here we are, our seasons have stopped, we have no idea where it's going on.
What do we do? What do we do?
How are we? And it was really a conversation about like, how do we deal with this as leaders, right? How are you motivating your teams? We're all of a sudden, this diverse of, displaced workforces, and and so we were just sharing knowledge and ideas. And in that conversation, we thought, and some of us were sharing research that we'd seen, and we thought, what? This is our time to join forces and use our collective platform to do something for good. And it took about 3.5 weeks from start to finish, from idea to end, but we executed what was called the Real Heroes Project. One of the agencies who works with the NFL and with Blizzard Entertainment stepped up, and it's 72 and Sunny. They're phenomenal. They're based down in LA. And we all came together. They came to us with an idea, and it was one of those collective yeses. And we, I don't know if any of you remember the We Are the World, where all the musicians got together. There were no egos in the room for us, just like that. All egos were checked at the door, and I don't even think we even thought about it. What we thought about is, what's the message that we can deliver? How can we uplift, especially these frontline healthcare workers? Because as you recall, as we moved through this pandemic, they started to get, more and more weary, and it looked more bleak, and it was getting harder, and they themselves were putting their lives at risk and their families. And it was just such an important time for us to thank them. And so the Real Heroes Project was about, each of us from the league had a couple of athletes take their jerseys and change the name on the back of their jersey to the name of a healthcare hero, a real healthcare hero. And then we made a film about it. It's on YouTube now, and had a special hashtag. And then we invited everyone, other athletes, fans, our own staff, to participate and share their story. And we hope that it continues. It had over 3.3 billion impressions in the first day, and an incredible following. We had a Beyonce song in there, and she supported it on her channels. And so again, the reward for it was actually seeing some of the healthcare heroes who were presented with the videos, the little films for them with their name on the back. And it was so emotional. There was one nurse who, he had just come home from a shift and was like ready to quit. And he was crying, and he was like, I didn't think I'd make it through another day. And then this video came out that exact day. And he's like, this gives me hope. And so those are the reasons we do that. And that's why we encourage everyone, all of you on this call, to participate and do that too, because they can't underestimate the power of a little, acknowledgement and gratitude for what they're doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. And speaking of the people on the call, I do want to say, we are taking questions from you as well. So if you scroll your mouse down to the bottom of your Zoom screen, you will see that there is a chat button. If you have a question or a comment, feel free to click on that button, type away, and we'll incorporate some of your questions into this conversation. So please don't be shy, chat away, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. Now, Heidi, this is not, I mean, we can talk about what got you to the NHL, but this is not your first rodeo when it comes to engaging with folks over digital and social and so on. Can you talk a little bit about your career journey and some of your other work with respect to innovation and engaging on digital and social?
Absolutely. I was fortunate to be part of like the early crew in digital, back in the go-go days in San
Mm-hmm.
Francisco. I'm sure many of the folks on this call weren't even born then, but it was really incredible. And I'd been in marketing and a marketing generalist. I worked for Kaplan Test Prep, which many of you may have taken. I worked there for many, many years. I met somebody who was recruiting for a brand new digital ad agency in San Francisco. And that was when San Francisco was the epicenter of this practice in this medium. And, we sat down and we had, about a 2-hour conversation. And he's like, "So do you want a job?" And I was like, "Well, sure, but there's only one problem. I don't know anything about the internet." And he's like, "Don't worry, nobody does." Because it was that early, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knew anything about it. He's like, "But you know marketing. And if you know marketing, you can learn the rest." And that was, the lesson there is that, there's always somebody who's going to give you a chance. And when you get that chance, don't let fear of not knowing something get in your way. And I fell in love with digital from that day forward. The minute I figured out that you could correlate, ROI back to exposure of your messages and your content and your media to actual results. And, the idea around, precision targeting and one-to-one communications. At that time, it was still pretty much panacea. It was all theoretic and we didn't have the technology to do what we can do today. But it's so awesome to see how far the industry has come in that time and to be along for the ride on that. So, things like being one of the first advertisers on Google, an Overture, and being able to share like the difference of Google was CPM based and Overture was bid based. And that was the beginning of bid based advertising, right? So got to be a part of that, being a part of, social media revolution. Not only did we look at it from, digital agency perspective, but when Rupert Murdoch bought MySpace and IGN and all of the digital properties, I actually had the opportunity to go work in his group and help bring MySpace to life. And this is before Facebook was uncloaked. And that was one of the most rewarding experiences from a business standpoint ever. It was one of the hardest, but also it was a business school of life, right? This is the moment in time when everything changed in marketing, right? It was where for the first time ever, consumers had, the ability to create content. They had iPhones in their hands. They had the ability to distribute. They had MySpace platform where they could build audience around their content, and they had a voice. And they were using their voices, and they were using their voices to tell brands what they wanted and to start having dialogue. And it really reshaped the contract, the social contract between consumers and brands. And to be a part of that revolution and to really, we did some of our early work at MySpace was around research, around understanding the value of friending a brand and having conversation for a brand and the long-term ROI. Today, that's table stakes, but that was so crazy out there at the time when we were doing it. And then from there, I went to another ad agency, and then on to Pandora, the music platform again, which was a little startup. It was, at the time that was about to go public, and they had the benefit of being one of the first apps on the iPhone and really on the forefront of mobile app-driven marketing. So all the clever things that we knew in the digital world did not apply in a closed app environment world, which was so exciting because then we had to reinvent everything from audience measurement and engagement and, thinking through all the aspects of consumer, how do you attract new listeners and retain them, and using data science to drive all aspects of our business. So the idea of being Pandora being a pioneer in personalization and data-driven marketing was a really, and being first on mobile was a really valuable skill set for me in my career too. So when you bring together the digital, social, and this data-driven personalization mobile aspect, that was the sort of the skill set I brought to the league. So joining the league, I didn't know anything about sports. I'd never worked in sports. I was what you might call one of the more casual fans of hockey, meaning I would go to Stanley Cup playoff parties, and that was awesome. And I grew up in Montana, so I certainly knew hockey, but I was not a hardcore avid fan. And kudos to the commissioner, because he said to me during the whole conversation, I've got a whole company filled with avid fans, and sometimes you can't see what you can't see, and so to take that which one might view as a weakness coming into an organization and being able to turn it into a strength. And by that I mean, if we're going to grow our business, we need to understand how casual fans view our sport and our game, and where the perceptions and barriers are, and how we can grow and expand. And so that's been sort of the gift that I've brought to the league.
Sure. And it's funny because I think about, and this is things you mentioned, the age of some of the folks on the call, when we were first kind of embracing digital, and you had mobisodes for 24 and text message voting on American Idol, and these were all like these huge innovations. The culture was different because it was really about like, I'll try it. Right? I can't tell you that we're going to get this right because we've never done it before, but I'll try it. And to your point, now we're in an environment where so much more is known, and you have agencies and vendors and technology companies and all kinds of folks who can kind of help build you a stack where you can kind of create a layer of engagement now digitally that you didn't have those resources before. And I'm sure that also changes the culture and changes expectations. I'm wondering, now that you are in a position where you have access to all those resources, how does it change the way you think about the job?
Well, for my motto is peace, love, and ROI. So anything that helps measure and socialize, that is the utmost importance. And I think that's really been some of the greatest advancements have been on the measurability part of it. Sure. Some of it also, I think we've gotten too complicated in this business, right? The market, one of the initiatives that is in my purview is building our fan engagement data warehouse and building that whole MarTech stack, unifying all of the data so that we can have a single view of our fan. We can understand sort of displaced fans across, the North America and the world. There's real opportunities from a marketing perspective to really knowing the lifetime value of a fan to the league, but also to the clubs, and really huge opportunity for us on that. It is a challenge that's so hard. It took us, several years to get this unified version of the fan. And, when I look at the tech stack required to do this, from an analytics platform to a marketing layer to an email service to our journey mapping, there's no one company that does every single thing right. And as as our culture, our tech culture has evolved, there's been a lot of acquisition that's happened, and sometimes they seamlessly plug into an organ, sometimes they don't. And so you find that once you get into the weeds on this stuff, it's not as easy as you would like it, and it's definitely complicated and expensive, but it's important and it's necessary. And so, really making the case from a business standpoint of why we need to make the staff and monetary investments in this to drive this future ROI and profitability it was a really big part of this journey. And then the second part of it was actually implementation of it.
So staying with that, I'm going to two-part question. First is, how do you, in this situation, obviously, there are a bunch of opportunities to try new things, but how did you rally the team to move on those things so quickly?
In this environment, meeting the pause?
The current pause, yeah. How did you, because it sounds like there's so much, going through the list in your presentation, so much content was created, and in a normal environment with a large, brand or large organization, the approvals alone would take you months and months and months. And here we are only 8 weeks or so into the pause, and the body of work is astounding.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And it's absolutely stunning that we were able to do what we were. We use Zoom and Slack religiously, and then kudos to my counterpart is Steve Mayer. He's our chief content officer, and he has a whole studio of people that produce they're Emmy award winning producers, incredible content. He got them geared up. He and the IT team got them geared up so they had access to everything from home, so they could create just as if they were in the office. We didn't have this in the pre-COVID world. We all worked in the office in the pre-COVID world, but because we used a lot of these tools and organization systems, we were able to quickly mobilize outside of it. And he and I joke, because we were able to move so quickly. We see each other more now because every day we're Zooming every single day and moving mountains, and everyone's collaborating, and it's just been such a wonderful experience. I hope that part of it continues, right? We were always collaborating, but the collaboration with the need for speed has really been and agility has really been remarkable.
And so, which is the second part of my question, are there things that you've learned or tried now that you're hoping will extend beyond this period? Things that you feel like, oh, wow, we need to keep doing that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely esports. We've got, there's more to come from that. And when you look at all the consumer sentiment around it, they're curious, it's definitely based on whatever age demographic you're in, your level of curiosity versus I don't get it, but there's still curiosity around it. So I know that we'll continue to double down and grow and see that happen. We hope to continue doing some of these content series with our players. I do think that we're going to see initially when we come back from our pause, there are going to be new ways that we have to engage fans. If we can't have fans in the building right away, which is all indications are that's the case, then what are the clever ideas? You saw in our video, a lot of it was really around fan moments and user generated content. And I think that there's no more important time for that than right now, and that we will lean heavily on that, which I think is, speaks to young fans. They love that. They're creating all this content to give them a platform to, be on our platforms alongside their heroes, their athletes, and hockey players they love, I think is a great opportunity. So we'll continue to do that. And we're going to continue to do more original programming. But we want hockey back.
I love it. No, for real. And it's funny because, you talk about displaced fans. So Islander fan living in LA, not easy for a bunch of different reasons. But I remember you had a stat at the beginning of your presentation where you talked about 57% of fans would try a new sport.
Yeah.
So, existing fan is asking you a question. What do you see as the next cohort of potential fans that looks most attractive to the NHL right now? The most likely to kind of bring into the fold, or, however you evaluate that, what do you think is where are you going to get the next group of fans from?
So we look at the greatest opportunity with casual sports fans, right? So fans of other sports might be more likely to watch our sport. So it's probably easier for us to get a sports fan than it is to get a non-sports fan involved in the game. So that's the first and foremost. If you were to say, pick a sport, what would it be? Different research shows different things, like NFL fans, that's such a broad base. They're likely to also be hockey fans. We also don't intercept in seasons very much. Right. Soccer is, very similar in many ways to hockey. So you can see a lot of correlation there. Hockey is such an incredible sport live, and it's got the most minutes of live action of any sport out there, all of them. And so we think that as you look at these sort of attention challenged, times ahead, forget generations, think about just times, that focus, that, kind of the civility of a hockey game where you have a focus 20 minutes and then you have a break, a focus 20 minutes is going to be really conducive to bringing on new fans.
Love it. And so here's another question from our group. how are you approaching conversations with sponsors during this time, right? Obviously, the sport itself is going through a very interesting time, which means any sponsors or partners or other kind of corporations who want to get engaged with the NHL, the means of collaborating has got to be up in the air. How do you even, how do you make that connection? How do you start those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, communication is the first and the most important thing. We're in regular communication with our sponsors. Like, we are so grateful to them. We wouldn't be here without them. So they're super important in terms of keeping them abreast of like what we're thinking about in terms of our plans, what opportunities might lie ahead, and thinking about like, is there a gift in crisis? Could we think of something new and different to do with them? But everyone from the commissioners reaching out to them to some of our players are reaching out to them, and of course our team that works with them on a day-to-day basis, just to make sure that they know that we're as committed to them when the sport resumes, that we'll be there for them, and we hope they're there for us.
Right. Any kind of non-standard opportunities right now for brand engagement?
I would say just getting, participation in any of our branded content, our original content series. Since we are breaking away from hockey only content, I see that as a huge opportunity for us to connect with brands that either have shared values around charities or community that we have. Like education around STEM. We're partnering with SAP on National Teachers Week. We just partnered with them. We've got a whole content series there. But also, lifestyle around fashion and food and fitness. There are lots of brands that are still participating in our space around that. And so that's where I think there's a good opportunity for synergy on that too.
Love it. So a friend of mine who I believe knows you and used to work with you asked, for those Zooms and Instagram Live, do fans get to come on screen video or just chat?
They just submit the questions. We've only had a couple that are the Instagram live to invite fans in. And actually, we had one with Max Domi. And one of a famous fan wanted to join him, but he left before we could get him in, and that was Mark Wahlberg. So Mark Wahlberg is friends with Max's dad. They hang out, and he was, and that would have been the epic one, right?
Yeah, of course.
The only one we've seen since then is really PK and Lindsay do a lot with their fans, and of course Austin Matthews and Bieber. So. But we're open. We're definitely open. Not every player is, open to that kind of like sort of raw, but the ones that are, that we would definitely embrace that.
Love it. And here's an operations question that may or may not be in your wheelhouse, but given the shared facilities between the NHL and the NBA, what's the level of kind of communications between the two leagues as you look forward to thinking about reopening facilities? Obviously, there's questions around safety and all that stuff, but there's so many arenas basically that host both. Is there a conversation that and coordination, or is that something where essentially the league is worried mostly about its own franchises and all that stuff?
There's an incredible amount of collaboration in the sports world at the commissioner level when you look at this kind of stuff. The ideas around, health and safety first, and kind of thinking through this in terms of, how each of us would unpause our seasons. We're kind of doing that independently and really taking that as our first moment to tackle, as opposed to thinking through. I think your question would be more relevant to next season, when things hopefully get back into a little normal pace and space. Both of us are in similar patterns in that our seasons were ended right near the end of the regular season and right before the playoffs. So I think we're both kind of grappling with the same thing, which is we'd like to, have the playoffs happen.
Right. We'd like to finish the season if we could.
Finish the season, but we both have a lot of challenges. Every state has different rules. So even opening for practice is a big deal because California is very different than, than Florida, and in terms of their policies and that kind of thing. And for both of us, having competitive balance is super important. So we wouldn't want to have certain teams not be able to practice, and especially nobody's getting on the ice right now, right? And it makes it even more difficult. You can grab a basketball and go out in the community or in your driveway and shoot hoops, but it's hard with hockey. So we need to make sure that, not only are we healthy for our staff and our players from a COVID perspective, but also we have the appropriate time for them to train. This is probably the most time any of these athletes have been off. And so getting back in to have appropriate training camp, and then thinking through how the season can or should end. And it impacts draft, it impacts everything. So there's a whole lot of stuff that happens there. And then for NHL specifically, we've got such an international team and, border issues.
Right.
So we need the Canadian border relief, right? We need to be thinking through, even the different states have different quarantine rules when you move there. We've got players in Europe that we need to get back. So
visa issues.
Yeah. So you've got all these things that you might not think about on the surface that are really impacting our thinking and approach and how we get back.
And even assuming that all of that stuff gets worked out and you are able to start having games again, my assumption is that, given some of the social distancing efforts, there's a likelihood that that's going to happen in front of empty arenas. So are you thinking about using Twitch, YouTube, or trying to find other ways to kind of facilitate co-watching experiences or other ways to engage fans for the live events when they can't actually be there themselves?
Absolutely. And some of it we're experimenting with right now with these, watch parties that we're doing, et cetera. Some of it's going to be enhancements within the broadcast and, maybe bringing some watch parties there. We're also looking at technology in arenas. So there's just so many cool opportunities and options out there, camera angles, things like that might make that we couldn't do if their building was filled with fans, right? So every idea is on the table and being considered right now. What we're trying to be, the priority is health and safety, and making sure our players are, physically back and ready to go. And then from there, we'll think about what's the enhanced fan experience and participation from afar.
Love it. So I'm going to, because we're kind of out of time, I'd love to talk to you for another hour. But there was another question that I got, which was basically how does the NHL coordinate marketing efforts with the teams themselves, right? We talked about player engagement, but how do the individual teams kind of link up with the NHL when you think about some of these initiatives that you've launched? And I think we can make that kind of the final audience question, but it is, I think, a good point to talk about this kind of command and control and coordination piece. We talked earlier about the speed with which you guys have been able to get stuff done, which is unbelievable, but we haven't really talked about what the landscape is. So if you could just kind of describe how that works, and what your role is in kind of herding the sheep, that'd be helpful.
Yeah. I always like to look at it as sort of a house of brands. So each of these teams or clubs is its own individual brand, its own individual business. They are operating everything, sort of independent of the league in many ways, what's best for them and for their fans. We're here for best practices, for overall guidance, and for unified approaches on certain, areas and topics. So we've been able to coordinate across all of the clubs. We do a weekly call with the chief marketing officers of every one of the clubs, and we talk about a lot of the consumer research that's out there, how that might impact us. We talk about how we collaborate on social media. Some of the players are doing content for us that we cross-post to them. They're doing content on their own that they cross-post to us. And so that together, we call it the 31 together, power of 31 plus, because we have one team that's going to come online in the next year. The power of 31, we're stronger together. And for us to really cut through the noise, we need to operate in unison on a lot of these big initiatives. So, we come together on things like the the strategy around community, communication, and connection. We came together around supporting the Real Heroes project and really making sure, everybody was participating and doing their part. We came together around our Fan Choice Awards, which is currently in play. They just launched on Monday. It's a program that all of the clubs can get involved in, the greatest moment. So we do both CMO level as well as social media team level coordination. It's generally the same topics, just sort of different levels of detail, and that's been such a nice way to build relationships. Again, it's all Zoom right now, but when it's regular season, we're off and running, and we don't often get the time to spend this much time together. And so I'd say that this is another gift of the crisis, is building and deepening these relationships that I hope continue to grow far beyond when the season starts again.
Well, I hope our relationship continues to grow far beyond the next season as well. And maybe when we all get let out of jail, we can do this again in person. I'll happily meet you underneath the ice, or whatever we have to do. But Heidi, thank you so much for spending time with us. We really appreciate it. It's an honor and a privilege to have you join us. Thank you for your candor and your wisdom. And, here's looking forward to season after season of great NHL action, fan engagement, and more. Thank you.
Woo-hoo, we miss hockey. Thank you. Take care.
Me too. You too. All right.
All right. Have a great day.